Welcome to the July, you're not ready? I thought I saw your thumbs up too, Aislinn. We'll start over. Good evening and welcome to the July 17th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. A meeting was held at 6 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall for clarification of the agenda. The following is the official agenda of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Discussion and commission actions will be limited to those items on the agenda. Any citizen who wishes to address the commission shall first be recognized by the chair and shall have their name for the give their name for the record. If a citizen wishes to read documentation of any sort to the commission, they shall first seek permission from the chair. There's a 3-minute time limitation for public testimony to the commission. Aislinn, will you please call the roll?
Here, and I previously viewed both applicants' properties, and I don't have anything to disclose.
Here and nothing else to disclose.
Here, I did site visits on agenda items number 3 and 4, and I have nothing else to disclose.
Present, I made site visits to agenda items number 3 and 4 with nothing to disclose.
Thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the minutes. The commission may wish to approve the minutes from the clarification and regular meetings held on June 12th, 2024. If there is a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll second.
Second. So we had a motion by Phillips and a second by Fry.
Phillips,
Yes.
Fry,
Yes.
Bartu,
Yes.
Fenwick.
Yes. This is a public hearing. The application presentation will be limited to 10 minutes. There is a 3-minute limit on public testimony. Those presenting or testifying will state your name for the record first, please. While giving testimony, questions and comments should be pertinent to the application and should be addressed only to the commission, not to the audience. During the public hearing, there should be no questions, comments, or applause from the audience. And should the meeting go longer than 8 p.m., the commission may take a scheduled 10-minute break. Commission members must make their decision regarding the application on facts already in the record and information presented during the public hearing. Protocol requires that commission members and audience be recognized by the commission chair prior to speaking. And I will eventually get to the page. And we'll start with agenda item 3. I declare the public hearing open. I would like to invite the applicant to come to the podium. The applicant bears responsibility for making their case. Following your presentation, the commission members may ask questions of the applicant. And this is for the Northgate Villas Division 1 subdivision preliminary plat.
Good evening, commission members. My name is Brady Smith with Avient, 161 Jefferson Avenue, Pocatello, Idaho, representing the applicant on this project. As previously stated, this is a multifamily complex project taking up about 13, almost 14 acres of land. We have 27 fourplex units that will be a part of this project. We have read through the staff conditions, both from planning, engineering, and all the different departments. And notwithstanding a few minor, I think, coordination items between departments, we're in agreement with those conditions and intend to try to make all those conditions happen as part of the final documents that will come at a later date to council and staff. One of the concerns, as I kind of read through some of the commentary, was that the Intermountain Gas Company would like to see a easement provided within the development for their services to be provided. We're fine with that condition. However, it is my understanding from the development group that there's no intention to use gas, but they will have no problem providing an easement for that if they want to put in conduit or whatever they choose to do. We're fine with that. But just for the record, that's kind of the intent of the project. It's going to all be electric. So with regards to the access lining up, there was another comment regarding that. We've come up with a plan where we think we can make that happen, so we will plan on doing that as well. This project is actually kind of a two ownership setup. So some of the land that you see is owned by one entity and the other land is what I'm representing. But the good news is they're kind of a good team. They've worked this stuff out, and they're basically in control of all the other land that's going to come in the future. So there's a good relationship there, and we're trying to kind of work hand in hand with them to provide them what they need for their future development, and they're trying to help us accommodate things for our development. So it's been a good working relationship this far. I really don't have a whole lot more to add, but we plan on providing all the services, to meet the standards. We believe we meet the code and the ordinances as set forth. And I'd just be happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'm sure we'll have some testimony possibly, and I'll get back up and rebut if we need to. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
Nope. No.
Think you're good. Thank you. Now we are going to have a presentation by city staff.
Good evening, commission members. Matthew Lewis, senior planner with the city. As noted before you is a preliminary plat application for a subdivision to be known as Northgate Villas Division 1. The subdivision is zoned residential, commercial, professional. As noted above, the applicants are proposing to subdivide the property into 30 lots, specifically 27 fourplex lots with off-street parking. One dedicated right-of-way lot, which is Fairgrounds Road. One dedicated lot for lift station, and one open space lot. The RCP zoning district requires a minimum lot size of 1452 per multifamily dwelling unit. Thus, 5808 square feet is required outright per lot. The smallest lot being proposed measures 7,380 square feet. All property owners within a 300-foot radius of the existing property boundaries have been provided notice of the public hearing in order that they may provide comment on the proposed request. Notice was also published in the Idaho State Journal and a sign posted on the subject property. No written testimony has been received as of the beginning of this meeting tonight. This concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have. If you have questions with regards to infrastructure and so forth, Merrill can answer those for you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Any on this one?
Straightforward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, without any questions or discussion at this time, we will start the public testimony. I would like to remind each person that when you do come to the podium, please state your name. Remember to only address the commission, not the audience or the applicant or their representative. You do have 3 minutes to testify, and you'll be asked to stop when your time runs out. Keep questions and comments pertinent to the application, and do not duplicate questions or concerns or comments that have been previously made or heard today. So with that, we will invite anyone in support of the application to speak. All right, anyone uncommitted to the application? Any opposed? Okay, would you like to rebuttal the lack of comments? Perfect. All right. With no further testimony or rebuttal, I declare the public hearing closed. How does the commission wish to proceed?
I think this is great. There was a couple concerns, both with the gas line and the roads meeting up. Developer agreed to allow an easement, and they feel pretty confident they can make that line up. I don't see any reason. Nothing about this gives me any heartburn. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the preliminary plat application from NG Land LLC and Portneuf Development LLC for the Northgate Villas Division 1, finding the application does meet the standards for approval under Chapter 1620.050 of Pocatello Municipal Code, with the conditions listed in the staff report, and to authorize the chair to sign the findings of fact and decision.
I'll second.
Motion by Phillips and a second by Fry. Aislinn, will you call roll? A vote?
Yes.
Fry,
Yes.
Bartu,
Yes.
Fenwick,
Yes. Thank you. All right, we will move to agenda item number 4, which is the preserve at City Creek. This is a preliminary plat subdivision application, and I declare the public hearing open. I would like to invite the applicant to come to the podium.
I don't know if it's good or bad, but I'm also representing this project. Brady Smith with Avient, 161 Jefferson Avenue, Pocatello, Idaho, 83201. Representing LandQuest Development on this application before you tonight. As mentioned, we have a proposal in front of you for 39 residential lots with a intended use of 4 open space lots, and I will try to explain kind of our intentions with regards to those as well as part of my presentation. But as everyone has probably seen the correspondence, there's been a lot of concerns regarding traffic and the prescriptive rights to Clark Street and et cetera. There's a lot of questions with regards to the road. And so we're a little bit hamstrung in the sense that we're happy to tie into whatever is allowed to be tied into, and we know that that might come with some off-site improvements, as stated in the conditions as far as an overlay on what Clark Street does extend from the town site, which I would basically define as where the hill starts at the base and up to our project. We're aware that there needs to be some road improvements as well as swale improvements because there is some erosion that's happening currently with regards to the stormwater runoff and things of that nature. There was also some concerns about how that stormwater was going to be taken care of. And our intentions are to try to utilize the natural drainage swells that exist, or gullies if you want to call them that, and capture with berms, with controlled outlet structures, the water. So if you can kind of imagine like a large-scale check dam system, essentially, on steroids, that's kind of what we're proposing. And in each one of those berms, there will be a controlled outlet structure that is allowable, is set to an orifice level that can release the pre-development flows. So all that will have to be calculated and provided to the city in the final steps to manage the stormwater that we're providing, or that we're producing on this site. So I know there's been a lot of concerns with the shoulder of the road and that drainage that exists there now on both our property and the neighbors' properties. But we have every intention, and it's been known through our preliminary meetings with staff at site plan review. We did try to come in, I believe at least 2 times, maybe 3, I can't recall, but we've really tried to get ahead of this as much as possible because we know it's a sensitive area. It all really kind of stems, there's a subdivision that's been platted since I think the 20s that just kind of sits out there. And we understand that there's going to be a lot of kind of maybe some negative feedback on this, and we totally understand that. But at the same time, you know, developer rights and, you know, property rights and those things really kind of, you know, need to be addressed as well. And there were some concerns about the open space and how we're trying to provide that. I wanted to kind of make a comment to that, and we're really trying to meet the disturbance. I think it was what the city really wants. If you really kind of look behind the screen, they're really trying to focus on the foothill areas is where we run into it a lot. But basically any slopes that exceed 15%, they really would like those non-disturbed as much as possible. Well, what I can tell you is the stuff that we've provided open space for, there's a lot of differentiating opinions on what that's used for, but the intent there, other than where our stormwater will come down, we plan to leave just as it is right now, vegetation, everything. not only for the deer habitat that range through there, but there are going to be some pathways in which they can still migrate and do their thing. So, we feel like we're trying to preserve that, which I think is what the city's after in the long run. So with that, we've again looked at the conditions. We've talked with staff, and we believe that we can meet or exceed the expectation with the comments that are here. One thing that I would like to mention, because it will probably come up, there's been a lot of talk about the open trailheads and things of that nature and preserving those. And, I think the owner is definitely open to discussion on that, but I think it needs to be on the record that, those trails, although important to all the neighbors, have been pretty much encroached upon. They're on private property. So if he wanted to, he could just go and put a couple bollards in and say no trespassing, and there you go. So I think we need to be real careful. If we really want that, let's get together and make a solution. But to just say, put it all on the developer, he could just say, these trails aren't even authorized. So, with that, I'd kind of end my presentation there and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commission, any questions?
Not yet.
Nothing there.
All right,
All right, I'll see you in a minute.
thank you. I'd like to invite the city up for their presentation.
Good evening again, Commission members. Matthew Lewis, Senior Planner with the city. As noted before you is a preliminary plat application for a subdivision to be known as the Preserve at City Creek. The proposal calls for the platting of 54.4 acres more or less into 37 single-family lots, 4 open space lots, and 2 lots which may be subdivided in the future for a total of 43 lots. The proposed subdivision is located on the west bench with the primary access provided via West Clark. The property is zoned residential estate, which requires that a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet be maintained. The smallest lot covers 15,900 square feet. It should be noted that lots 1 and 2 of Block 2 are eligible to be subdivided in the future, and that is noted under Condition 6 in the staff report. The property is located in a designated wildlife habitat protection area. Therefore, the development is subject to Code Section 1704.170, sensitive lands standards. See condition number 8 regarding fencing. You may have noticed we did receive some comment back from Idaho Fish and Game there, and so that is within your packets. The property is also located in a designated wildland urban interface. Therefore, use of fire-wise materials and landscaping principles shall be required per city fire department regulations, and this is noted under condition number 9. Also, in relation to fire, applicant will be required to provide a plan with a specific timeline for a secondary access, which shall be reviewed and approved by the fire department officials, and this is outlined in condition number 10 of the staff report. A portion of the property has slopes in excess of 15% grade. Therefore, development is subject to Code Section 1705.100 slope development standards. In this case, the steepest areas, which include the ravines and / hillsides, are being set aside for open space, which entails 15.76 acres more or less, or 29% of the 54.4 acres. Staff is recommending that restricted designations be placed on Lot 5, Block 1, Lot 27 of Block 4, and Lot 28 of Block 4 as part of the final plat. The note shall state that said lot shall remain ungraded with the exception of a portion of Lot 28, Block 4 as needed for stormwater ponds. The note shall also state that said lots are to remain unbuildable and this is outlined in condition number 3. Regarding condition 4, the following discussion, after following discussion with Public Works, it is their preference that the existing 12-inch water line be protected by easement, and that a note be placed on the final plat stating that that said easement will be dedicated to the city of Pocatello. All property owners within a 300-foot radius of the existing property boundaries have been provided notice of the public hearing in order to provide comment on the proposed request. Notice was also published in the Idaho State Journal, and 2 signs were posted on the subject property. Any written comment received has been forwarded to the commission for your review and consideration. This concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Again, please note that Merrill is here and available to answer any questions with regards to traffic, stormwater, and infrastructure.
Thank you. I know you guys have questions.
I don't have any for Matt. Merrill's gonna have a few.
Okay. Do you have any for Matt? Brent?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Maybe.
Any questions, Eugene?
No,
Not yet.
not yet. Yeah.
We'll swap you out.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Merrill Quayle, the Public Works Engineer for the City of Pocatello.
Go for
Traffic.
it, Roger.
The traffic, we will be requiring for full build-out a traffic impact study because of the owner that owns so much of the properties and out there. So there will be that as it comes into final, just like we've done with most of the other developers on the hillsides that own a lot of property in that, so that we get one that encompasses all their property there. As far as the traffic, this is just like anywhere else in town. You know, the above City Creek was one years ago, the early 2000s when that was built on the west side, and coming down the hill and everything, the traffic that went into Old Town and that, it'd be no different than that. The roads will be improved. We're requesting or requiring, you know, the right-of-ways to be cleaned up, dedicated, where we have prescriptive rights. And then also that the road considered as West Clark now, that was improved in 2000 by the city of Pocatello, that there is a 2.5-inch overlay over that area that would encompass about 36 feet, which is the walking area on the one side there and there on the sides, and then also 2 12-foot travel lanes.
2 12-foot.
That's what it was designed for back in 2000. And looking at that and going through there with the design criteria and so forth there with it had the radiuses with some super elevations on it, and also with the grades and the clear distance, as we've talked about, is that's what that is, that 2 foot or the 6 foot clear space on each side for the design speed.
Thank you.
And then it's got more than that, but that's what the asphalt section was designed for.
Rich.
Sorry, go ahead, Eugene.
It is a congested area. The streets are narrow, a lot of homes, a lot of parking on the street. Anybody think about doing a one-way, take one of them streets, you know, forget Clark, Fremont, Center, to get, so they're all going the same way. Otherwise, you end up driving halfway up a block and another one's got to pull over for you to get around at that whole area around Lincoln and that. Did you think about a one-way thing, or
No,
is it possible?
we've not. There's not possibility for a one-way there. Fremont, you're not going to get a road that goes down to Fremont. off there and with the slopes and the grades there. West Clark is that. There are 3 blocks that are narrow, and that as this development builds out, once it hits a certain point, that those 3 blocks will need to be widened. There is a 60-foot right-of-way there, so it'd be kind of like what was done over on Whitman when City Creek came in. I think there was 3 blocks over there also that was widened. The planter strips would be narrowed. The sidewalks would be taken down, because behind the curb and gutter roughly, I think it's about a 30-foot back to curb, so there's about 14 and a half feet roughly behind the curb that is right-of-way that would be widened just like it was done over on Whitman. And then that would widen it out. Like I said, once it hits a certain traffic volume, then that would start to take place.
Anything else?
That is it for now.
Rich?
I answered some of my questions, but I still have one, and maybe this is for Matt, so, but maybe not. The stormwater, the applicant referred to maybe like a check dam system. I know that hasn't been designed yet, but are those going to be deeded back to the city, or will those be privately owned?
The area on the one lot that is, let me see if I can get
Lot
back to my
27?
lot 27 there. More than likely, that will tie into the existing system that we already have there and would be dedicated to the city. And that is all on the developer's property, where you're
Okay,
seeing those on there.
So the system that the city has up there now, you're saying that would be tied into that? Is
Yeah,
that
it'll tie into all of that eventually, but it'll also, the ponds and that will be designed so that it will take the design storm and have it detain, and it'll detain it, and then the overflows would go into the pipes.
Okay.
Those pipes were designed for at least 85 acres of development property back in 2000.
Okay. And they're currently being unused, or what are they? I
Now,
guess.
they are used when we get the bigger storms, and right now it doesn't, the natural drainage that goes down through there and that, and the system, it was designed as if it was built out
Okay.
up there for that
So it's
main
adequate
trunk
for
line.
that.
It's a 24-inch pipeline
Right.
that goes down there, and then the bubble ups and some of the treatment facilities that are already there, and then goes into the another head gate or head wall there right above the house, end house on the north side.
Okay. Thank you. Another question, secondary access. Has to be,
Secondary access is gonna be
that
just like Trail Creek and just like the other areas. It has been designed, the fire has looked at their overall proposal as it moves across, and that's where we're saying, again, back to the traffic study, that would be for all the properties up there. There's the plan as it works forward as in the fire code and allows that eventually the roads will be tying over to City Creek.
Okay. And then, I don't, we may, well, still confused a little bit on the prescriptive. Will those, once, assuming this goes forward and it gets paved, those become right-of-ways and easements? Or that's just something we work out with the property owners up there?
We'll be working with the property owners in conjunction. Like I said, the developer will do the overlay and the improvements of the existing road that was constructed in 2000. And the city would be able to do that. That paperwork should have been completed in 2000 also, or shortly thereafter, 2002 to 2001. And it was not, for some reason. I know there was some deaths in their families and different things like that as I was reading some of the notes that I had, and just don't know where it fell apart. But the person that was assigned to do that did not get that done.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Feel good about that? I did want to talk a little bit about that prescriptive roadway, just so that it was on the public record. we talked about it a little bit in the clarification meeting, but just to go over it a little bit more in detail for the record, we did have a public comment discussing some parcels that were believed to be privately owned as part of Clark Street, and it sounds like the city, through research, has determined that that area is, the roadway is prescriptively owned. It's prescriptive. I don't know what the proper grammar on that is. And that the city is working with the property owners at this time to get the proper paperwork in place and get that completed
Yeah, well-
before this project continues, or kind of,
It'll be in conjunction
conjunction
with, like I said, we've kind of brought it to their attention, the property owner, and we'll be working with them, the city will, to go through that and explain the prescription of what went on. It was determined even back in 2000, looking at some of the memos from the city engineer at the time, and through that there was prescriptive of the roadway prescription was at 50 feet. And from our understanding, or my understanding, is that back then, the laws were that you had to have roughly a 5-year use and different things and taxpayer money and so forth. And we had a lot more than 5 years at the time. And the laws have changed a little bit, but we still fall in with the new laws very easily with all the time frames there too. So we'll be working with them to get the proper documents and that put together. And then I know in that memo too, for the public record, it said with taxes, they will need to work with Bannock County if on any tax items the city has any jurisdiction there. That is the county assessor, that whatever happens there would have to be the county assessor.
thank you. I think the only thing that I didn't see addressed in the staff report that was brought up by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game was the issue of noxious weeds and the potential of spreading those through construction and vehicles kind of moving through that area. They had a recommendation on how to minimize this to an extent. Was that discussed at all any further? Is there a way to help with that, with mitigation?
There would be mitigation that takes place in any of the developments in that, and we'll continue to work with the developer and property owners with those items.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, before we start public testimony, I would like to remind each person again that when you do come to the podium, please state your name. Remember to only address the commission, not the audience, the applicant, or their representative. You will have 3 minutes to testify, and you will be asked to stop when time runs out. Keep questions and comments pertinent to the application, and please do not duplicate questions, concerns, or comments covered in previous testimony heard today. With that, I would like to invite anyone providing testimony in support of the application to the podium. Anyone uncommitted? Anyone opposed?
I thought my neighbors would come up first, but they didn't.
There we go. Will you sign in, please? And say your name.
My name's Thomas Klein, and I can write my name and say it at the same time.
Thank you.
I live on Lincoln. I'm concerned about this development, particularly with regard to the impact of the surrounding neighborhoods. So I was part of the conversation of the original development on City Creek, and I thought there were some good things that happened out of that series of meetings. The one thing that I'm still sorry about is that Whitman was widened in response to the increased traffic. And I feel that I can say with some truth that is always a negative for the houses along those lines, along that street where it's narrowed and the planter strip is narrowed. In general, I've observed that the houses there seem to be rentals and they're poorly maintained. And they're, people seem to make less of a commitment to them. So that I would foresee that if Clark were widened to address the increased traffic, similar things would happen in those 3 blocks. And I think that would be a real loss for the people who own those houses and live there. I'm also a bit confused and concerned about the secondary access. It still seems a little kind of underexplained for fire, and I think that's a genuine issue. As we saw with the fire and the Charlotte fire, you need multiple access points to be clearly established early on. So those are remarks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marshall McGee. Some of this I've just learned it may not be as pertinent as I thought it was, because I'm still, like Tom, had no idea about the secondary access. But anyway, I'm sure I can finish in 3 minutes. My name is Marshall McGee. I live across from the proposed development off West Clark. I am perplexed by our housing developments on the benches of our city. I've driven around Pocatello to see how interconnected our sidewalks are with the new subdivisions. Several new and many old bench subdivisions have limited curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. Many have no sidewalks beyond the development, forcing people to walk in the street before reaching the next group of houses with sidewalks, such as West Clark, Lincoln Avenue, Fremont Street, Barton Road, Ammond, all have no contiguous safe passage for our pedestrians. This proposed development on the west side of Pocatello with the new residents' children going to public schools of Jefferson, Irving, and Pocatello High School. All 3 schools are within a mile of the new development. Jefferson Elementary, at the last records I could find, had 341 students in the 22 to 23 school year. The school capacity is 644, so there's plenty of room for the new students. Jefferson was built in 1980. Since then, there has not been one student that walks up to school from West Fremont or Gwen that's used a sidewalk to safely get to their grade school, simply because there's no sidewalks to get to the school. By my count, there's 16 houses, along with 1 duplex and 1 triplex on West Clark before getting up the west bench, that do have sidewalks. As the road climbs out of Old Town to the bench development, the new road's quite steep with no curbing or sidewalks. So I'd like to see these developments be required to have some sort of contiguous sidewalks to help our city. Like we stated before, there's going to be 43 homes on West Clark with only 1 egress. And the property owner has nearly another 150 acres to develop as he sees fit. So learning what I've just learned tonight, I think we will have a secondary egress off of that. And I just want to know who's paying for all of this. And counting the 150 acres of undeveloped property between City Creek and West Clark Street.
Thank you.
I had like 1 sentence left.
Really close. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
Good evening, Paula Jones. I live on South Lincoln and went through all that turmoil when the City Creek subdivision was put up, and I have a rental on West Clark. So I'm a little concerned about the people on West Clark and to have to live through what we lived through and are continuing to live through. I'm not in favor, when I first wrote this, I was not in favor of this proposal, but after I've heard a little bit from the questions that you answered and from staff, I can see that there's been some good work done, and there's going to be some continuing work done. Some of the things that I would like to see is some more investigation on the impacts. And it sounds like that hopefully with the road counts, that will help. I will caution you that they told us on South Lincoln, after they did the road counts, it would not affect our street. It affects our street. And people are going down Lincoln so fast, it's really scary. We've had the damage to our cars, to the side mirrors along that street, just as one instance. Bureau of Transportation says that the average vehicle takes 4 trips up and down from their house, to and fro. That's average, and I'm sure that's probably what you'll be looking at as well, and using that average of 4 trips to and from. Let's say there's two cars to each one of those homes. That means there's going to be additional 312 cars on West Clark daily. That's assuming 2 cars. And we all know that there's people who have more cars because I see them outside. They don't have enough room in their garage, so they have them outside, so there's 3 or 4. Clark Street is very narrow. We've talked about this earlier, and many cars are parked on the street. Those lots are small on that 900 block of West Clark. And if you do take away some more land to widen that road, what's going to happen to their parking that they have off street? I'm a little concerned about that as well. I heard just today that the developer has land where he could introduce another way down to a safe way down. I'd like the city to propose that to the developer, that possibly that he could take the land that he has, he can safely have a second egress. That could really help an awful lot.
Time.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else that would like to make any comments that's opposed? Okay. I'm gonna wait and not hit the gavel. Would you like to rebuttal? I forgot we had people speaking this time.
Thank you. I'll try to go through these as I kind of wrote the notes down as was mentioned. With regards to kind of some of the things Merrill talked about, with the road, like I mentioned in my presentation, there are some negative impacts currently there with erosion and things like that. So as part of the overlay, which the developer's fully aware of, he does also recognize that we need to touch that stuff up too. So as part of, although we may not have much control over this prescriptive process, we will be intending on whatever we're boxed in for wise, we acknowledge that we will need to improve that. One of the things when I was hearing him mention, there was some question about cost and who's paying for everything. Well, in this example or this project, it would be a combination between city and developer, but likely with what's being proposed in the conditions, it's developer. So the developer is going to pay for the overlay, the shoulder improvements, et cetera. So really, other than in the town site section, now that's a separate situation, which I can't really speak for within terms of acquiring property and acquiring additional right-of-way. I mean, we're kind of limited to what we can do. And I would argue that we're even going further beyond our boundary down to the town site to help improve this, kind of an inherited problem that's been here long before we entered the scene. So I do acknowledge the impact there with the traffic and so forth. But as I listened to Merrill's impact or his statement on the design for the road, I believe it was 36 feet with walking paths on each side intended. So I'm not saying I know exactly what the solution is, but I can generally tell you that when we get with staff and we work through issues, there, maybe we could utilize some of that on one side or the other to help this cross connectivity that was mentioned by Mr. McGee, I believe it was, if I've got his name correct. But I think there are some opportunities to be able to safely get an accessible, path of some sort possibly within that. Now, what the surfacing would be and things of that nature, I think we're a little bit preliminary on that. But it looks like, from what I'm seeing here, if we do in fact have 36, feet of good and maybe even some extra, maybe there's some opportunity to capture that. So I definitely think that the developer is aware of that and has every intention to try to do whatever he can to kind of help along this path. But I also want to mention for the record that, he understands that there's some conditions that he inherited too that aren't ideal. And so he's trying to do his best. But as most of you know, development, is paid for by the developer, and that's what drives build out. So it kind of comes hand in hand. So you can't, have the things we have unless the developer gets involved. So if we just shut this thing down and say it's not going to work and et cetera, that's that much more that's not going to the tax base and those types of things. So I think we need to look at the broad picture in its entirety, not just on one side or the other. With regards to the traffic counts, I know that's been mentioned on all three kind of impact statements. We currently do not trigger, I know here in Pocatello, we kind of get accustomed to, we got bad traffic. But if you go anywhere else in the country, it's just not that bad. The problem is we kind of get used to what we get used to, but these traffic impact statements or studies, they're looking at it globally, nationwide. So when you have peak hour trips that trigger certain things needing to be done, there's a rhyme or reason behind that. And so I know that we'll have a lot of disagreement from the audience, but in the reality of it all, 1,000 peak hour trips is really kind of what starts moving the needle on these things. So as it currently stands, our current phase does not trigger that need, but the developer is aware that because he does own so much land up there, that a traffic study is appropriate. So for the audience, I do want them to know that he's aware of it. He intends to have one done. And then as this develops further and that triggering starts to happen, obviously those recommendations will be from the study that's done on what needs to happen to accommodate the extra traffic. So we are aware of the traffic. We're not trying to skirt anything. Traffic studies are very expensive and it's a cost that he's going to have to bear. So again, that will be the developer paying for that. Secondary access, this is a little bit complicated, but I'll try my best to explain. So Trail Creek, as was mentioned earlier, is kind of an example. We have since on Trail Creek punched through a road all the way across that now kind of serves as that secondary access. That took a long time in the process, and we went through a similar process with that where we had to kind of give a long-range plan, explain how we were going to get across the things and so forth. Again, we're not intending to get up the hill further right now. This is kind of the start of things, and if things go well and we continue to develop in those areas that are identified, I think it's lots 1 and 2 on block 2, those will be future subdivided. And although we don't have the layout turned on, we do have a plan and controlled rights to Cove Road, and there is an intended connection there that would allow anybody within that direct subdivision to access a different route than going down West Clark. The problem is you still have to get to West Clark, but I think the goal is if there's a fire, can I get away from the fire? And yes, you will be able to get away from the fire. Now, it may all still bottleneck down to West Clark. That's something that nobody can really directly take care of, but we do have a plan for secondary access as it's needed in the second phase, which would be lots 1 and 2 of block 2. That's where that secondary access would touch Cove Road, provide a second way to get out of that subdivision besides the main entrance. So that's our plan as of right now. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything on that one. Secondary access, talked about the contiguous paths, traffic impact. Anyway, I believe that's everything I wanted to kind of touch on in rebuttal. And anyway, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions?
Have you guys laid out the migration pathways for where it's a game management unit? Have you?
We have not laid anything out currently, but what our hope is to try to, and thank you for bringing up a question. It kind of sparked another thing I wanted to mention, but I wanted to provide clarification, hopefully Matt's okay with this, I'm not trying to catch him off guard, but that access that goes through there for the 12-inch water line that the current city has through there, we made that a lot. They're asking for an easement, but we would like to keep that a lot because it actually goes down and touches Fremont, I believe, is that the right road? And that's where I think everybody's kind of explained to me anyway, that there's a kind of a quasi trailhead there. And so what it provides is also a way to get the pathway through. So the city would control that, they would own it, that lot would be dedicated to them. It protects their water and it also provides them the ability to allow things to go through there. It's 50 feet wide. And so our only change to that condition would be, can we just keep it a lot versus an easement? Because it will actually be given to the city. And I think that's a direct way across from Fremont through that property with really city controlling it. So that would be the only change that I wanted to make mention of. But in terms of all this wildlife and how we're pathing that through, that has not been determined. We know that the Fish and Game would like that, but a part of our protection of the slopes is we're hoping that they can use their migration patterns through those treat areas, because obviously when houses are built, they're not going to shelter there, but they're probably going to move down into the gullies. And those should be protected other than the storm drainage that we need to do to capture and hopefully protect the downhill neighbors. That's our goal. So the pre-development that Merrill's talking about, these outlet structures are intended to slow the flow down in a controlled environment. We've got enough capacity to hold enough water so that it can be released at a decent rate. So you're not just having things run down and wash out. So that's the goal with those outlet structures, is to basically provide, some calming of that water. So it's not just racing down there. So anyway, that's the best I can tell you right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll close the meeting. Okay, with no further testimony or rebuttal, I declare the public hearing closed. How does the commission wish to proceed? You guys want to discuss this?
I think we've answered most of the questions that,
I have a couple thoughts that I think were just addressed, but I just want to reiterate them because I know that citizens in the area are concerned, and I think it's fair to you guys to reiterate these things a few times to hopefully clear things up. And so maybe the city can jump in if I'm going rogue and not answering this correctly. But in regard to the second access, and I know that we've had this a couple of times, it's the International Fire Code that we're following. And in that code, it states how many residents in what type of space before we need a secondary access. And I believe based on that code, there doesn't need to be the second access until phase 2 goes into effect. And that's when that would go in. So I just wanted to be really explicit on that the city and developer are incredibly aware, and nobody wants to see what happened on Charlotte happen again. It was devastating. I think we talked a little bit too about, and I just want to drive it home, cost sharing and how that works in developments. I think that gets really confusing sometimes on who takes that burden on. And a lot of times what does push development is that it's required that the developer is putting in some of those utilities, accesses and stuff, and that later on those things might be maintained by the city, but initially the developer's putting those in, which I think kind of addresses also access and walkability, which is also part of our comprehensive plan and something that the city has indicated is incredibly important to the safety of our community and our quality of life. And one thing that I think is probably going to be contentious until we are all long gone is traffic studies and the flow of traffic, and not just what flow of traffic looks like, but what the consequences of that are, whether that be losing the mirror on the side of your car because someone was speeding down the roadway, or that, a child could potentially be in danger because someone is going too fast. And we've talked to the city about this in the past, and that it is typically a policing issue as far as keeping people going the right speed limit, which is unfortunate. I would hope that we would all just go the speed limit. But the other issue kind of with that is, and I think this was brought up, is that we're kind of used to in Pocatello having front door access to things. I know that I will circle the parking lot at Fred Meyer if I don't get a pretty close parking space. And I think that speaks to the mentality in our community too about what we expect for traffic and accessibility. But the city is going off of code and national recommendations on what's appropriate for traffic in a neighborhood, and that it can be extremely disconcerting to the citizens that aren't used to that type of traffic or the consequences that come with. But that's how the traffic study is looked at, is based on these codes, and does it fit within that? And then it's our role and the city council's role to ensure that those codes are followed appropriately and that we are abiding by the laws that are set in place. And if those don't work, then it's up to us to change those later on as citizens. But I just wanted to be really clear on those things. I'll stop talking. Any questions or thoughts? Okay. All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion. A motion to recommend the approval of the preliminary plat application from LandQuest Development, Inc. for the preserve at City Creek subdivision, finding the application does meet the standards for approval under Chapter 16, 20050 of Pocatello Municipal Code, and the conditions in the staff report, and authorize the chair to sign the findings of fact decision.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion by Fry and a second by Bartu. Aislinn, will you call a vote?
Yes.
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 All right. On to agenda item number 5, which is the city initiated repeal of Title 15.20 sign code and text amendments to Title 17 zoning regulations. I declare the public hearing open. I would like to invite Jen to come up and tell us a little bit more about this.
Good evening, Commission. Jennifer Flynn, Planning and Zoning, Planning and Development Services. I'm the Assistant Planner. There we go. We've spoken about this a couple of different times, and I want to be as exact as possible, but also feel free to, I want us to be comfortable and elaborate on anything needed that needs clarification. So I'm not going to read my staff report tonight. That was provided in the packet. And so I thought that it would be most useful if we kind of reviewed what we've done in the past and things that seem to be regular questions. And we'll go from there. Please feel free to interrupt and let me know if you have any questions. So currently, our code has a long description of the purpose of signs. And below, you'll see the proposed code and the purpose of signs in that code. I just did a quick, informal survey asking random people in my life or at work, what are the purpose of signs? And signs exist to advertise, instruct, warn, give visual cues, provide general information, and give directions. And unbeknownst to me, this has become such an emotional issue in the community, and I appreciate that everybody feels passionately about it, but I want us to stay focused on what the purpose of signs are. And really, it's to give information about businesses, about directions, about places that you should go, ways you should drive, and safety. So why is the planning department seeking these changes? We're working to be proactive planners, setting the tone for Pocatello's future. We'd like to make code easier to understand, interpret, and implement for both compliance and which in return gives us less need for code enforcement. If people can understand it better, they can follow it easier. Electronic signs are the most common complaint that we get from residents regarding signage, and that's why we've addressed curfews or illumination in this proposed code. To enhance the look of our city and reduce sign clutter. Also, community leaders, in particular City Council, have asked us to address billboards and curfews of signs specifically, as well as code enforcement issues. And lastly, a survey was issued, I feel like right around 2 years ago, that kind of started a big conversation in our community about what do people like and what don't they like about signs. And all of the history and survey results are available to anybody that would like them. So recent history is that on April 10th in this year, we met to bring a revised sign code to the commission. So back in November of 23, Jim Anglesey brought sign code to you guys, and basically what the outcome was is this is confusing and unclear. Just start over again and give us some better sign code. So then I had joined the planning team about a month before that, and so that was my task, was to rewrite the sign code in collaboration with my peers and try to come up with the best solution based on what I had watched in the videos, the feedback we were getting from leaders, as well as the public. So we needed clarification on code, on how code will impact signs and that do not comply with sign code. So that's basically legal non-conforming signs. And all of that's addressed in our current code, and we can get more into that if you'd like to. How will code impact our ability to conduct code enforcement? And genuinely, simpler code will make it easier to do enforcement. One, really because we can share information better with business owners so that they understand what's expected. We wanted to clarify multi-tenant property allocations and how they work, and we can talk to that. Address how code works for abandoned real estate signs. A lot of the public seemed very concerned over that. And then addressing off-premise signs, meaning, you know, the familiar term is billboards. Off-premise signs include other things besides billboards, but billboards seem to be the biggest point of concern. And then also dimming and curfew for electronic signs. So we had a special meeting in May. You asked for clarity on high durable material in signage. And so these are just the items that were added to the code that's before you today. Giving clarity on high durable materials, standards on how we will allocate signage to existing businesses and multi-tenant facilities. It was decided that we should propose 2 versions of code, one with standards for off-premise signage and one without those standards. So in simple terms, that means that in one version of code, we have standards to allow for future billboards. In another version of code, they're capped and they will stay where they're at. Again, we have 80 billboards in town and 18 just outside of the city in the city of area of city impact. Also important to mention that there was a lot of discussion during the special meeting about electronic signs, and EMCs just mean electronic message centers. That's any kind of sign with an internal light bulb that's going to light up the sign. And so there was a lot of discussion about, do we want to change the regulations on EMCs? Do we want to get rid of this curfew? You know, a lot of controversy around the curfew. And really what it came down to in that special meeting was that the commission felt that it was really important that signs be able to be upgraded to electronic signs, and that's billboards or just regular signs. And to kind of balance that, the curfew was left in the proposed signage because just out of respect for other people that are driving around, night skies, and also just sending an indicator to patrons of businesses if the sign's off, the business is closed. So just a reminder on that, the curfew as written in code is from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. or hours of operation, whichever is least restrictive. So I think I've covered the changes that we've made, but again, in version 1, it contains standards for off-premise signs. In version 2, it does not contain standards for off-premise signs. The current off-premise signs would be able to be maintained and taken care of, but no new signs would be allowed. We added a definition for business elevation to account for the existing multi-tenant businesses. And staff clarified what high quality and durable material means, just to assure what it is that signs can be made of. And staff added clarification on an abandoned sign. Okay, the second bullet there says, in version 1, notification of off-premise sign permit applications was changed to 1,000-foot radius. I think that as you guys have sat through these public hearings, you hear a lot of people complain that, well, I live, 309 feet from the site and I never got any information about it. We hear this on a very regular basis with, especially with electronic billboards. And so we turned it into a radius instead of a linear footage so that more people would be aware of the attempt to put a billboard close to their house. Staff also added clarity on the EMC standards, and in version 2, no off-premise signs, new off-premise signs are capped. Since I took this position, I just think it's really important that we do more to get information out there. So I just want to encourage anybody watching this or sitting in the audience, if you are interested in using the QR code, you take a picture of that with your phone and you can sign up for an email list, and that just gives us a better opportunity to share information on signs or anything else that people might be interested in.
Might have to put that QR code back.
Sure, we can go back there. Are there any questions or anything while I'm pausing?
Any questions from the commission?
I'll wait till you're done.
Not yet.
Okay. I think that, we've talked about a lot of this. The slides that I'm using are replicas of what I used during our special meeting. But just to be clear, an off-premise sign is a sign for goods or services that are not located on the same property as the sign, or a sign that directs people to off-site locations. So simply said, if you have a business on a certain parcel and there's a sign on a different parcel, that's an off-premise sign. And a lot of people think of them as billboards, but they can fall under other names. So this is a little bit hard to see on the screen. However, you have it in your packet. It's available to the public for anybody that's interested in looking at it. This is just an illustration of billboards in town. And like I've already mentioned, we have 80 billboards already within the city limits. And then we have 18 billboards that are just outside of city limits within this area of city impact. We can discuss the dimming and curfew. Talks about illumination and how brightly illuminated a sign is able to be. The code refers to lumens. During the day, it's allowed to be 3 lumens, and at night, or from 11 to 7, based on hours of business, the sign would be required to go down to 1 lumen, or they can turn it off, or the sign can go to a black background, but really just asking that signs not illuminate bright lights during the nighttime. We get a lot of calls saying that, people can't see things, there's issues interfering with their residences, things like this. And really, again, that illumination is just an indicator to let a patron know if the business is open or not. And if the sign's off, the business isn't open, and they can come back during business hours. This meeting was noticed in the Idaho State Journal, both on July 2nd and July 9th. It's been on social media and the city, as well as the city website, and notifications were sent to TV and radio stations. We did receive one public comment from the Northwest Sign Council on July 11th, and I haven't seen any other public comments since. That concludes my presentation. You know, if you want to see any examples of the way sign code will be implemented, how it is now versus what would be in the future, be happy to share those with you, but really just want to take this in the direction that people have questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
Yeah, I got some from our meeting in May.
Yeah.
A question that I had at that time was smaller sign operators who aren't necessarily operating signs for profit.
Sure.
So the one that I thought of was Mountain West Radiator, who is technically, because he advertises his business on it, but it's
Yeah.
just his. He puts like the date and the time and the temperature.
Yeah.
And it was small, and it, you know, wasn't one of these massive billboards. And
Mm-hmm.
so was he going to fall under the same requirements for dimming and those smaller, older billboards that don't have the ability to dim like some of the newer ones that are being built with? What were we going to do with those? And there's not very many, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was a question of mine.
Yeah, so I went and spent some time with him just to understand like the software that he uses, and is it in fact impossible for him to turn it off at night. They have timers in that software, so you can kind of set it up where the signs will go off at certain times. But yes, he would, you know, any sign would fall under the request or requirement to dim. I guess the other thing that I want to remind people is that our code enforcement is complaint driven. And so if there aren't complaints.
Not bothering anybody.
Yeah,
there's a good chance he'd
exactly.
be able to continue
And
operating.
typically it's those super bright signs. You know, what I noticed on his is that his only shine red
Yeah,
lights,
it's just red.
red light bulbs.
Yep.
And so red doesn't travel very far, and you know, it's as much of an issue as people make out of it. But yes, he would fall under the same
Okay,
requirements.
So there's no real allowances on those particular situations. We're just
No.
gonna group them in with everybody. Second question, how, and maybe I missed it, how are we determining 1 lumen?
There's a gun that we use.
Oh,
I mean, gun might not be the right word, but it's like a kind of laser thing that you shoot
Sort
the
of meter.
sign. Yeah, it's a meter.
Yeah,
And so
okay.
that's how we
So
would.
we do have a method there
Yes,
that can standardize it across all the signs across the city. It's not just,
we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
You have to like kind of be directly in front of the sign and just get that, for lack of, I'll call it a meter. Get the meter directly in front of it to be able to measure the light coming off of it. But yes, we do have one.
great.
Perfect.
One question, how do the codes compare in Idaho Falls, Boise for dimming? Do they have the same type of regulations? or-
I did a lot of research in preparing this code, but I don't remember in particular what their curfews are or how that works. So that'd be something I'd have to look into for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Eugene, anything?
I was just wondering how this working out with the Chubbuck area. Are they kind of in sync with your plan, or?
Well, especially in terms of off-premise signs or billboards, Chubbuck has had billboards prohibited for, I think, around the last 5 years. I'm not positive on the year on that, but they're prohibited at large in Chubbuck. And they had to kind of phase them out over 5 years. That's the timeline, is they've prohibited them, and they have to be phased out over a 5-year time frame. So I would say that Chubbuck's more restrictive than Pocatello is.
Right, okay.
Any other questions?
Abandoned real estate. What was our solution there?
Well, I think what the real concern was is that if somebody leaves a building, then they have to, their sign is required. They can't leave real estate signs up or things like that while we consider a real estate sign active. And what we're asking in the code is that after a certain amount of time, if the building isn't transitioning to a new owner, that sign or the sign face just be turned around so that it doesn't indicate that there's a business there that's not actually there. It's just more of a blank sign. And so the cabinet stays there for the next owner to be able to use.
Good, okay. Thank you for taking this on when you were brand new and getting initiated really quickly.
Yeah.
We'll let you know if we have some more questions
Thanks.
in a bit. Before we start public testimony, I just want to remind everyone again, when you come to the podium, please state your name. Remember, only to address the commission, not the audience or the applicant. You do have 3 minutes to testify, and you will be asked to stop when time runs out. Please keep questions and comments pertinent to the application. Do not duplicate questions, concerns, or comments covered by previous testimony heard today. I would like to invite anyone providing testimony in support of the application to the podium now. Oh, yes, and please sign the sheet.
You got it.
Aislinn gets after me if I don't remind you.
Oh, you want it neat? I can't do that. My name is Robert Ridgway, and I brought some extensive notes here. So first of all, if you guys provided cookies, I'd come to a lot more of these.
Me too.
I want to say it was a good effort. The effort of the sign code is a good effort. I think they tried to do a very good job from previous codes. And I'm glad that we have some measurable device that can identify the brightness of signs. We did previously, but we used nit units instead of foot candles. But I'm strongly in favor of the curfew. I think that the 11 to 7 curfew makes a lot of sense to me. I have personally no reason to see that across the city. I mean, our geography, fortunately, it's a beautiful geography, but in any sign lit in the middle of the night, you can see from a lot of different places. I don't think we need to see that, so it makes no sense to me to do that. In the last meeting that I attended, some very legitimate comments were made by the sign industry regarding the technology. And some of the signs are quite old, and they would be very expensive to upgrade immediately. I think the consideration there should be taken. I think you should be able to give your professional staff the ability to make compromises with the sign owners and give them some sort of a time frame to change over. That shouldn't have to be done immediately. And if that can't be done, then I believe it should be brought here rather than through a hearing examiner. And the reason I'm saying that is I think the wisdom resides here. You guys are having to contend with this, and I think the more people that look at it, the better it is. As far as the off-premise signs, I also agree with the presentation. There are too many here, and some sort of limitation should be made. Somebody said that previously that they would rather see the signs in the junkyard. I'd rather see the junkyard. I might have an opportunity to upgrade. So I'll take that. I guess I'd urge you to move along with this thing. Otherwise, this might exceed the time of your tenure on this commission. So I would urge you to move forward. As far as the code enforcement part of it, they're always overwhelmed. It's always been a problem with the city. I appreciate their position. They got too many complaints. So I think a restrictive sign ordinance or a very specific sign ordinance is appropriate. So that's it. I've got 11 seconds left.
Thank you. Anyone else in support?
Thomas Klein. This is becoming my favorite way to spend a Wednesday evening. I'm in favor of the new sign code, particularly the version that restricts billboards. I think the fact that Chubbuck is phasing them out speaks a lot of, it's not just us that has this concern. If anything, I would prefer to see a curfew from 10 to 7 rather than 11 to 7, but that's just me. I agree that we've had a lot of good discussion and a lot of good input, so I think it is time to move ahead with this. I believe that constitutes my remarks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Susan Marion. I'm mainly wondering what's the statistics on the effectiveness of billboards or off-premise signage? Since everybody looks for everything online, looks at ratings and reviews to decide where they're going to go and what they're going to purchase. I just don't really see the function of it. They used to have a lot of function. I don't see the function of them anymore being terribly useful. And then my other question is about the meter that measures the lumens. How tall is the ladder, or how are you going to get up to the really high signs? And how often is that going to happen to measure that? And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in support? All right, is there anyone uncommitted?
Hi, I'm Tally Richardson. Just wanted to say, first of all, thanks for giving me the chance to speak, hear me out. I think it just goes to show your efforts in making sure that the community has a role in the decision making. So thank you. The first slide of this meeting of this Agenda 5 stated that the purpose of this chapter is to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare by regulating existing and proposed signage. In all the changes that are being proposed in the new sign code, there's one area that is being neglected that I have hoped to address to city leaders for a very long time. And I guess I never did it because I just didn't know how. And when my husband heard about this meeting, I thought, this is my chance. It is the area of making sure that our signs align with our city's goal of improving the physical and social character of Pocatello. That statement came from the Pocatello Comprehensive Plan 2040. In my home, we take several preventative measures to make sure that we preserve the physical and social character of our children. This includes setting limits on the kinds of media they are exposed to. I'm teaching my children that exposure to excessively violent or sexual content can have a significant detrimental effect on their social character. They understand that pornography can lead to antisocial behaviors that hurt communities, and moreover, the most basic unit of society's families. I did not expect to get emotional here, but please excuse me. What may start out as a simple curiosity can lead to offensive acts and compulsive behavior, including going down the rabbit hole of harder, more violent porn, and even child pornography. We've seen the effects of this in our own city. It is likely that every one of us here has been impacted or knows someone who has been significantly impacted by this vice. My efforts to protect my children and raise competent, giving adults are undermined when they're exposed to signs in our community that most people would consider inappropriate for their children. The sign that has prompted me to come before you today is located on the intersection of West Quinn and Hurley Drive at the bottom of the underpass. What I'm asking city leaders today is to not forget the moral responsibility they have when considering their, quote, desire to improve the look and feel of our commercial areas in Pocatello, close quote. I know I'm not alone in asking that this be a part of the conversation. Again, every single one of us in this room has likely been impacted. I'd like to conclude by quoting again from Pocatello's comprehensive plan. It states that one of its goals is to determine what actions, policies, or projects would empower or enhance the community and prioritize their implementation so citizens can thrive.
Thank you.
Thank Anyone else uncommitted? Anyone opposed?
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Appreciate your time and energy. I'm Jeff Young with Yesco Custom Electric Signs. My grandfather was given a loan by his father for $300 in 1920 to start the business. And according to legend, his mother told his father, don't do it, he'll never pay you back. So we're lucky to be in business today. 275 South Fifth Avenue is our address. I make mention of James Carpentier's letter. He details out from the International Sign Code our main concerns with the code. Nearly 50% of employment in the U.S. is in small business, and they are facing significant headwind today for a number of reasons. I cited before when I was here, 1 out of 5 business fails first year, 5 out of 10 in year 5, and at the end of 10 years, 2/3 of all businesses that were started are gone. It's hard to be in business today. Part of the stress of these businesses is the fact that TV, radio, print, and direct mail have all on a massive decline. It's just not working like it used to. And online spend has now gone to 50% of all ad spending. But online is not a catch-all, save-all. That puts immense pressure on businesses to advertise in other mechanisms, and we're seeing that increased demand in our industry. GeoPath, I'd urge you to write that down and look at it. GeoPath is the online resource that allows our customers to know exactly how many motorists are passing in front of their business. And so when it comes to shutting signs off and their investment in their advertising, when you shut them off, there's direct damage to their advertising spend. And that now, it didn't exist 10 years ago, is a significant factor. I've driven the town between 11 and 2 a.m. More than half of the signs are lit overnight. And it still confuses me why light has become a bad thing. We think of Thomas Edison and the Nobel Prize given to Shuji Nakamura for inventing LEDs. This was a Nobel Prize. It's changed our lives. Our customers do not support the curfew. They do not support the size restrictions. We haven't talked about those at all. When we create non-conforming signs, and the vast majority of our signs, help me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, the signs will stay and they'll get uglier and uglier and uglier over the decades because our customers are not going to want to take their signs down because of the new code. It's as if you have your car tonight and you'd have to downsize it, and you would never do that. You'd keep your car for 30, 40 years. So having flexibility allows architects and designers to improve their environments and improve technology. The last thing I'll mention, and I'm out of time here, I would urge you to think about the businesses and the significant pressure they're under to be successful and how important they are in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I've been here a few times. I can't talk and write my name, though.
It's a special skill.
It is. Hi, Frank Nuding. Guys, thank you for your commitment and help in this process. I've got, we've done this 4 or 5 times. I think that each hearing, as we have another hearing, we're wearing people out. I mean, you have a huge crowd, then you have a big crowd, then you have a medium crowd. And now we've done this so many times is that, you know what, you're just wearing everybody out. You have businesses here that have come to you and said, look, we are opposed to this sign change. And we keep coming back and the crowd gets smaller, but the message is the same. I mean, I know you're under some pressure or some mandate to make some changes to the code, but I think businesses have spoken to you and nobody's listening because we keep coming back and doing this over and over again. So on the electronic message boards, turning them off at 11 o'clock, so you turn the switch off and then you turn it on in the morning, and then so you cool it down, you heat it up, and then it creates moisture. And so basically what you're talking about is damaging people's expensive electronic signs. So nobody's brought that up. All we've done is kept going over and trying to move this code through. I think that we need a little bit more homework done on the impact of turning signs on and off. And I think everybody here should be aware of that because it's an expensive investment, to market and/or advertise your business. In addition, where are we going with signs? We're going away from just a board or a monument sign. Times have changed. I mean, it's, Pocatello's changed. Trains change. I mean, planes get bigger, everything changes. And so what we're doing here is we're talking about eliminating change. We're trying to go back and put us into some place where we've come from. So that's my feeling here. I appreciate all the work that these guys have done, but I don't think we have too many billboards. I think regulating the light that is emitted by them is absolutely appropriate. But turning them on and off or turning electronic signs on and off, we are and have always been a shift town. We have workers that still go to work, at Simplot, at the old Heinz plant. So, these investments in advertising are something that we should protect, not try to censor. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Lee. I also work for Young Electric Sign Company, but I wanted to come to you tonight as a citizen of this community. I was born here. My father was born here. My grandmother was born here. Her picture hangs on the walls of Pocatello High School as well as my father's. My two oldest boys went to Highland High School, and the other four will attend Pocatello High School because of a boundary change. My wife was also born here, so we're lifelong citizens. Now, after coming back to Pocatello from a few years away at college, in the year 2000, I was told then, and this is verifiable information, that Pocatello at that time was the second largest city in Idaho, second only to Boise. As of the 2020 census, we now have Boise, Nampa, Caldwell, Meridian, Idaho Falls, and then Pocatello. In 20 years, we've gone from second to sixth. And I also saw some other projections that show in the next 5 to 8 years, Twin Falls, Rexburg, and Coeur d'Alene will also pass Pocatello. Now, why is that? Frankly, it's because these communities have created a business-friendly environment. Now, I know some of you are thinking that it's just a sign. What's the big deal? A few years ago, I had a business owner, a dental business in town, that was very shocked once he learned what he could not do in terms of signage on his property. And he told me then that if he had known, he never would have opened business here. And to me, that's sad. I know that these changes are requested from some people. I always thought that the sign code in Pocatello was somewhat restrictive, and this is making it worse. It's making it tougher for business. As my colleague said before, businesses are facing challenges these days. And so let's not make it harder for them. Let's find ways to make it easier and work with them. And as Frank also mentioned before, that the crowds have been bigger in the past, and we're just wearing them down. Some of you may ask, why are they not here tonight? They're at work. And they've been here before, and they feel like they're just not being listened to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening again. It's good to see you, and thank you for your service. We know you have other things to do, but we appreciate it. Credit to to this team. We've worked hard at this. Excuse me.
Your name?
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I'm Nathan Young with Young Electric Sign Company. Yesco Outdoor Media. My apologies.
You're good.
Thanks to everyone for their efforts. Here we are again. We're not going to repeat the same things. The curfew is not fair. It's promoting business. It's promoting livelihood of individuals that live here, that were born and raised here, and it needs to disappear. The billboards have been around for a long time. They continue to be very, very prevalent in all of our communities. We had a gas station recently open up, and they built a massive sign, and it was great. Right on the freeway, they got business. They put 2 billboards 2 miles on either side of it. Pump sales went up 10%. And he said, I'm sold. I get it. And they work. And that helps commerce, that helps jobs, that helps everyone in these communities. The code continues to be in progress. It needs a lot of work, starting with the curfew and maintaining the rights of the billboard owners. What are we going to do? Having these rights taken away. Likewise, as mentioned previously, these billboards are on land owned by local citizens of Pocatello. If we start restricting billboard owners, those landowners then don't receive lease payments, another form of income. We do not want to restrict them. Likewise, we don't want to restrict the general advertising items that we do. We do believe in light mitigation. We do all the things. We want to play by the standards within the industry that have been adopted. And so my request and urge would be, let's continue to work on it. Let's make a win-win proposition for both the city and for the billboard operators so that all parties can be meeting in the middle with compromise. And if we can successfully do that, then we'll continue to flourish and we'll continue to have success and people will be happy. As mentioned, this is a very, very sensitive item. And in the code proposed, it talks about a billboard owner needs to move a sign. It comes to a hearing. All it's going to take is more sensitive and more arguments and more emotion and more frustration. That's not going to accomplish what we're looking for. And so I would again urge that we find a compromise, focus on cap and replace, focus on what other municipalities have done, because it works. It's not the greatest, but it works. And with that, thank you again for your service. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My name is Craig Lookingbill. I drove here from Twin for this meeting because I think it's that important. I work for Lytle Signs. We do a lot of work here in Pocatello and surrounding areas. I didn't come nearly as scripted as Mr. Young did, but I did want to touch on a few points, especially as I heard the things that were brought up. A good sign code that has good restrictions can be great. You don't want the restrictions to be too much because it can also cause problems. Sign clutter was mentioned in your reporting, and that sign clutter typically and many times is from unauthorized signs. Signs that have been put up without a permit, signs that nobody got any permission for, they just put them up. Some of those signs might be 20 years old when nobody was asking for a sign permit, but a lot of them get put up when they shouldn't be at all. The reason why that happens and you get signs that aren't permitted is because in a really restrictive sign code, at some point the business owners finally say, forget it, I'm gonna put this sign up, we'll see if anybody complains. And you've said that your policing of the signs tends to come from complaints of the community. So it'll depend on which sign it is and where they happen to put it and how big it is before you finally get that complaint. And it may be cluttering things already, but you may get plenty of stuff that isn't permitted, that shouldn't have even been allowed. And then obviously all your code that you put together needs to be very consistent per the zones. I mean, if you have a commercial zone, everybody needs the same rules. That's where I kind of wonder a little bit about the termination of the lighting at 11 o'clock or your curfew time. I'm not sure how okay that is unless you make everybody do it and not just somebody that might be closed or opened at the time. That could be a little sticky. And I'm not, I'm no attorney, I'm just saying that could be a little sticky. But I will say you did have a question for her about other sign codes, and we do business in Idaho Falls and Pocatello and Boise and Twin Falls, and there's no other community that I'm aware of that has any curfew whatsoever. At least not that I'm aware of. However, they do require them to dim lights, especially on the message center signs that can be so bright. They do have requirements to dim those down to a specific point when it gets dark. And most all the quality signs that are message centers have the ability to do that. There shouldn't be any reason that most can't unless it were a really old sign. So those are just some points I wanted to throw out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Reeder. I work for Lytle Signs from Twin Falls, and my main job there is doing sign permits, which is probably 70% of my day. And as I listen to this and read your sign code, it seems like you are recreating your whole sign code to solve two problems: message centers and billboards. And I just wanted to point out, for example, I'm looking at your code. In CG, you are allowed a freestanding sign, 1 square foot per 100 linear feet of building frontage. So if I have a building that's 200 feet of frontage, I can have a 200 square foot sign. However, that sign's only allowed to be 20 feet tall per your code. So think about that for a minute. I'm allowed a 20-foot tall sign, and it can be 20 feet of a solid sign, 10 feet wide, 20 feet tall. That's what's allowed. That just seems a little silly. I mean, if I can have 200 square feet of sign and you want me to compact it so my sign area is 50% of my total height, that just seems a little bit extreme. You also mentioned, just another simple example, you mentioned window signs have to be included in your wall sign allowance, which, by the way, I felt your wall sign allowance was reasonable, but when you throw in window signs in there, that's huge to enforce. So your wall sign allowance and your window sign allowance are the same. Window signs are cheap, they're easy to install, they're easy to remove, they're easy to reinstall once you get in trouble and say, you can't have that. When you wait a week and there you go, you're done. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, like your illumination, as I read your sign code, it sounds like you are killing signs at 11 o'clock. Every sign in the city is off at 11 o'clock. What happens if you need an emergency room at 1 o'clock in the morning? I mean, what do? I mean, there's got to be a better way to put this in your code to regulate how you want to do the brightness and the curfew. I just think it's a little extreme, at least it's how it's written in code, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this a little bit, but as you read it, it reads right here, every sign's off at 11 o'clock, every sign in the city. You pull in here at night, you're trying to find a hotel, 11:30, 12 o'clock. This town will look like a ghost town. Like the gentleman mentioned earlier, how this town is slowly receding in population. Well, if you're from out of town, you want to come in here, you do business, you come in town late, the whole place is, there's no lights anywhere. Do you even wonder what people are doing here? I mean, what's going on in Pocatello at 11 o'clock at night? Are we home in bed? Or, it's just, again, it's just my point is I just think we went a little extreme on this code. By the way, I will point out, I did like the fact that you changed how you calculate your allowance. I always felt really smart when I could go, well, if you have 1 foot of open space, you get 1 square foot, 2 feet of building. And then if you have a 35-foot tall sign, it's 75% of that. It just made me feel really smart when our customers or my salesmen come up and say, how did you figure that out? And I'm like, holy crap, this guy's got it right here. So I was a little sad because it made me feel smart, but it is certainly a better idea the way you've written it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else opposed?
All right, thanks for the time. My name is David Whitehead. I own Sign Pro in Idaho Falls. We, based out of Idaho Falls, we do a lot of signs here in Pocatello. I would also like a clarification of the EMC because I just got here, but I live streamed it on the way down, so I'm up to speed with what we're talked about. But I think it needs to be clarified that an electronic message center is a digital display that can change. But I think the wording of the sign code is restricting all electric signs. And so I hope that we're clear on what that talks about, or what the meaning of that is. I can tell you that there is no light curfew in Idaho Falls or Rexburg. Height restrictions in Idaho Falls is 60 feet. Ammon is 50 feet. I agree with the different zones. I live in a residential zone. I don't want to, I'm a sign guy. I love signs. I don't want a sign right outside my front window, but I live in a residential zone. If I go to a commercial zone, it's where you see signs. It's where you see parking lots. It's where you see businesses. There's a place for it. Also, just a reminder that even if a business is closed, it doesn't mean they don't have potential clients driving past. And that's, the sign is advertising, and it should be able to advertise all the time. Also, I think it's always discounted on what sign people that represent the sign industry say at these meetings, because you possibly think that we're just all about the money. But when you think about it, all we do every day is work with businesses about signs. We know what they want. We know they want electric signs. We know they want billboards because they work. And so a few complaints from the general public that don't rely on signs, I think should be more discounted than what actual people that work with thousands of customers over the years have to say. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else with testimony that's opposed? I think we got everyone. Okay. Well, thank you all for your testimony. Jen, would you like to address some of the questions that might have come up?
Thank you for the time to come back up here. I'll try to address things just in the order that I wrote them down. So I'll just start at the top. One of the first speakers mentioned that small businesses are struggling, and we have put a lot of work into communicating and talking with business owners to understand what their needs are, what their concerns are. We had a kind of a collaboration group made up of some small businesses as well as other community leaders to understand what were they concerned about, what would help them, what are their problems right now with our sign code. And so I think it is a very fair statement to say the code that we're proposing provides more signage, not less signage. A lot of people are getting caught up on the electronic signs. However, that is a small part of the overall signage that people use. And so we've worked really hard at making it easier and providing more signage where appropriate to businesses small and big. Another comment was made saying that this code is going to make a bunch of signs non-conforming, and those signs will just become deteriorated and look terrible around town. We have standards in our code that talk about how signs are able to be maintained and updated. And if they wanted to have new signs, I, in most cases, would guarantee that they would be allowed more signage than they were under the current code. Another comment was made saying that turning on and off signs will damage the signs. We absolutely listened to that. I spoke with Daktronics, I think was the name of the company, and I spoke with a regional rep from Daktronics and tried to understand sort of the technical issues behind electronic signs. And so that's why we've written the code the way that we did. We're not requiring people to turn their signs off. We're offering that they dim the sign, they turn it to a completely black background, and if neither of those work for them, then they can turn it off. But turning it off and turning it on is a last case alternative. Really, dimming is what the option is, and I believe that any signs that have been installed since 2018 were required to be dimmable. Whether or not they are, I'm not sure, but that code has been in place, for the last, 6 years. hoping that people are starting to use dimmable signs because this is a trend that's a very regular thing happening in the sign world. I want to comment that, somebody mentioned that this is a really dangerous policy and you won't be able to see hospitals or emergency services or highway signs, any of that. First thing, any kind of emergency services are not included in this sign code. And any businesses that are 24/7 can leave their signs on 24/7. So for example, somebody just referenced a hotel. A hotel is a 24/7 operation. It's okay for them to leave their sign illuminated. Another comment just said, be business friendly with signs, and genuinely, we think that this code is more business friendly. Again, we've listened to business owners and we're doing the best we can to make our code understandable by them and something that's going to benefit them by offering signage on all elevations of the building. So right now, unless you're on a corner, if you're on a corner, you're allowed 2 signs. If you're not on a corner, you're allowed, a wall sign on one side of the building, and in the new code, they would be allowed signage on all faces of their building. So it's offering more signage per building. Says this code will make getting signs harder. It will be easier to permit signs and to process the applications and easier to understand what signage is allowed, in my opinion. There was a comment that said rights of billboard owners will be taken away. And regardless of which version of code we're looking at, we're not taking rights away from anybody. All of the existing billboards are allowed to remain in place. They're allowed to be maintained and, taken care of. We have the standards in the code that talk about how they can be maintained. However, in the code, in the version where future signs are prohibited, if they lose that lease, then yes, they lose that sign. That is the way that it would be. Somebody else commented that we want win-win situation, and I appreciate getting the insight from people with different opinions. What I've started to kind of recognize is that, and it's a perfect example is the letter from the Northwest Sign Company. They're very critical in finding things that they want to complain about in that letter. There's very few things saying, hey, thanks for this, nice job on that. There's none of that. It's poking holes in exactly what they want because it's not ideal for the sign companies. And I completely respect the work that these sign companies do and the services that they provide for businesses. I think that we're trying to work in collaboration, not against them. Gentleman mentioned the code consistency by zones, and I just encourage you to look to the table. All of the code is completely regulated by zone. And so, based on whether or not you're in a residential zone, there's a certain types of signs allowed versus residential, commercial, professional, and then it goes on to more of the commercial zones. So I think that we've been as consistent as possible. With the curfew and consistency in our current code in the RCP zone, illumination or curfew for electronic message centers is 9:30. We've just gotten rid of that, and we're just making it across the board 11 to 7 or based on hours of operation. And so we're trying to be as consistent as possible. The comment came up again about a curfew we should be asking for dimmed signs, and that's exactly what we're asking for is dimmed signs. The comment was made that we're recreating code to solve 2 problems. I assume he was talking about billboards and illumination. Those are really the only items that are being focused on in this code. But I have a long list in my staff report of all of the changes that we've made. And I do want to comment, I think David brought it up. I gave the wrong depiction of an EMC. It's not externally illuminated signs or like the internally illuminated signs. An EMC, by definition in our code, is a sign or portion of a sign that can be electronically or mechanically changed by remote or automatic means. And so we're not talking about the internally lit signs or like spotlights on a sign as far as the curfew goes. Do you want to add anything, Brent?
Just to clarify that comment, so those internally and spotlit signs are regulated by the curfew still. The EMCs, though, to Jen's point, they are the digital displays, basically, is what you see now. And David is correct in what he is describing those, and that's what we interpret an EMC as. So just want to be clear on that.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I feel bad because I heard something tonight for the first time, and I don't know if I haven't been paying attention up to this point, which is probably the case. But
Sure.
Under the new sign code, section D, which is illumination,
Okay.
going down to subsection C, which is curfew, all signs shall not be illuminated, and this is not EMCs, this is just all business signs. Between 11 o'clock and 7 o'clock, that's the curfew we've been talking about, or outside of the hours of operation. So if they closed at 6, they would need to shut down at 6. No.
Whichever is less restrictive.
Whichever is less restrictive. So
Yeah.
kind of their choice there. however they
Exactly,
choose.
yeah.
You said that 24-hour facilities
Yeah.
were able to leave them on. That's what I heard, I think, for the first time tonight, is that if you're open 24 hours, you
Yeah.
can leave it on. Okay, what if you're open 22 hours?
Then you can leave it on 22 hours.
Is that,
That's Right?
what I read it as.
so, okay, all right.
I mean, that's how I understand it. If
Or
the
outside the hours
words
of
need
operation.
clarifying, we can clean that up, but that's the intent.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, or whatever is least restrictive. And
Sure,
So if they're, whatever hours of operation they are open beyond that 11 o'clock or
Yeah.
before that 7 o'clock.
That's really simple. I understand it now. Thank you.
Brent's better at explaining.
No,
things.
you did a great job, Jennifer. That was poor comprehension on my part. Okay, very good. Going back to, we will allow EMCs to stay on because that's been a hot topic if they are dimmed.
Yeah.
This is something that I just don't know enough about signs to be able to weigh in on this, so I feel bad almost that I'm having to make a decision here. Is one, well, and we talked about 1 lumen, and then in here it says 0.3 foot candle over ambient lighting, so that's different. That's during, I guess,
The
regular,
day.
yeah, daytime operations, but at night it needs to be 1 lumen. Do you know if that's an industry standard? Can they go in and just say dim? I'm just worried,
Yeah.
I'm trying to make this work for the sign owners. I would love to see them lit up all night, but to a reasonable standard. I don't necessarily, I'm not of the belief that they need to be shut off. I'm fine with them being on, but again, I think they should be dimmed.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if you learned anything from talking to your regional rep from Daktronics, but is there a way to reasonably dim it? I mean, we're putting this 1 lumen on there, and I don't even know, is that attainable with a sign?
It's attainable, but it's not visible, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
idea is that they go dark.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And no, that's not the industry standard. It might have been 0.2. I don't know. I'd have to check the documents that Daktronics sent me. But, as far as I've understood, the intent was for signs to go dim or quiet during night hours. And so that's how we've written the code.
Okay.
Currently, there's no curfew at all, right?
9:30 is
There is just in the RCP zone. So RCP is typically where schools have like those electronic message centers. And in the RCP, I believe it says that EMCs have to go dark from 9:30 to 6:30 or something like that.
But that would, residential areas, I mean, usually you don't have lit signs there anyway. You try to stay in the commercial areas.
Sometimes.
How many, I mean, your enforcement is complaints,
Yes, sir.
basically. That's how you enforce this. Now, are we having a lot of complaints about the lighting? And why did they complain about the lighting?
You know, kind of ebbs and flows. I think we get more in the winter because it's longer, you know, it's dark longer in the winter. When new signs go up, when new electronic signs go up, we get, you know, I'd say a few calls in on those signs, and those complaints continue over a few weeks. And then, you know, one sign in particular that's been a recent one, we worked with the owner of the sign, and he's tried to dim it to a place where it was working for the resident that was complaining about it. So it just depends.
No, but you know, if you weigh the residents' complaints versus the economy in the community, you know, you're always going to, you can't please everybody.
Absolutely.
But these signs are expensive.
Yep.
You can rent them, and it's 24/7. But if you shut them down, I mean, they're still paying that same amount of money.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes I just wonder why we need to, and then those that are open 24 hours and those that maybe are only open 14 or 16 hours, one gets an advantage over the other. I'm just trying to figure out how we're weighing the complaints versus the positive side.
I'm not sure how to answer that. What I can tell you is that we've talked a lot. You know, some of the billboard companies have mentioned that they have extended contracts, and so we will be hurting their business if we ask signs to turn off. I mean, from my experience in business, you prorate things, right? It's the amount is divided over 18 hours instead of 24 hours or whatever the case is. Right. We've also talked with our legal department, and you know, should we move forward with the curfew, we would have kind of a sunset date on this policy. So it wouldn't start, I think what we decided was a year from date of implementation, just so that companies understand what needs to happen with their contracts.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Thanks.
With no other further testimony or rebuttal, I declare the public hearing closed. Does the commission wish to discuss this?
How are we gonna go about this?
Well,
I've got a few things.
same, yeah, go ahead.
So again, going back to the illumination, curfew, my suggestion would be to enforce the curfew only in residential and maybe RCP. Residential for sure, possibly RCP, but to get rid of the curfew in the commercial and industrial zones. That's just, I think that's reasonable. I live adjacent to commercial and industrial, and I can't think of a time that I've ever been bothered by the light, and that could just be me. I understand I don't speak for everybody. Along those same lines, I can't figure out, I remember when that sign by Applebee's first went up, and they must have been getting it dialed in because I was at my friend's house, and I, like through the blinds were shut late at night, and we could see, you know, it was illuminating part of the room, and I opened the blinds. How on earth did they allow that to go in? And they must have either I've gotten used to it, or they've tuned it up because I don't notice it anymore. Same with the one on the corner of Oak and Yellowstone, which used to be so bright. I don't notice that one either. So I don't know if I've just gotten used to it or if they've figured it out a little bit. But anyways, that's beside the point. The other thing that I would recommend doing, if we approve this, would be to approve version 1. I don't think that it is wise to cap billboards in a growing city. I think we will continue to grow. I don't think we should cap that. And final recommendation is that we strike D, well, let's see. Subsection D under electronic message centers. And I don't think that we need to turn them off. I'm fine with using some sort, well, I think we should use some sort of wording that indicates they do need to be dimmed. They can't be the same brightness they are during the day. And I don't know enough about signs, and I feel bad again that I can't use language that would specify that or make that clear. I think they should be dimmed, but not to the point where they're no longer visible. And again, that's just going off of my own experience driving around at night.
Well, I'm in favor of just leaving the curfew alone. If your business is open 18 hours and you want to shut the light off, shut it off. If you want to leave it on like your competitor 4 blocks down the street, who cares? You know, you are advertising your business 24/7.
Well, I think the current curfew is actually a bit more restrictive. It technically ends at 9:30. We just haven't been enforcing it. So we're talking about a new curfew, and once that's, anyways. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I
yeah.
mean, and you go from regular lighting and it's gonna dim.
Yeah.
What are we doing? I mean, doesn't make any sense. If it really is bothering people, that light, you know, on them hours of the day, I don't think there's that many. There's more people going to and from work in them dark hours than there is, you know, than the people that are turning in for the night, you know. That's who we're really trying to side here, that we got too much light for them. You got the retail, you got the commercial end, and I think they ought to let the commercial end do their thing. And then on top of it, you got the enforcement, you know. So when you create changes and now you're gonna have this, well, he did it and I can't, and here, it's just, if you want it on, leave it on. That's my thought.
I have a few thoughts. One, I want to thank the city for entertaining us for months and months. I know that's incredibly frustrating. And same to the community members. Thank you for showing up again and voicing your opinions. Obviously, I would like to think it's obvious that we've listened because we've had additional working sessions. We've asked the city to go back and do more homework. We've asked pretty critical questions. And the city has come back and answered those for us, and I appreciate that very much. There is no way to please everyone. I recognize that, and I think it is important that we really need to weigh the impact on businesses. Pocatello is my home, obviously. I've lived here most of my life, and I want to make sure that it thrives. And I also want to make sure that our codes are appropriate to the times and readable. And I know that what sparked this was that our code was terrible, is currently terrible. It is hard to read, it's hard to enforce. It does not meet with the standards that we're seeing nationally. And I was impressed that the city was proactive in trying to address an issue outside of just billboards and that, but that there was an entire code that really wasn't working, and tried to be thoughtful on how they put together a new code. So thank you on that. Based on many conversations, hundreds of pages of literature, I'm pretty good with the way the code is shaping up. It is night and day difference from the original code that was presented to us. I think we've been heard. I think our critical questions have been addressed some of the issues we had originally. It seems to have been mitigated in different ways. Originally, the concern was we're going to shut the billboards off, and Frank had some great points, I think, at that first meeting, that you're going to hurt people's investment. And that was a great comment, and I'm grateful he was here to express that. I think we've mitigated that now by speaking with sign companies and understanding that we can reduce the lumens and protect that investment. Those are my thoughts for now.
I feel like I agree with what Frank said, that, you know, we have less people at each meeting as it goes along. That also includes the people that were against, I should say, having EMCs. We had a couple here tonight. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Personally, I feel like we need to limit any restrictions on business, especially now and the way times are now. I personally live in a neighborhood that's affected by an EMC, and I'm not going to use my personal feelings as far as this hearing goes. I like the fact that we've established different zones for, you know, different requirements in different zones. I think that's awesome. You've been committed by a couple of sign companies for that step. I appreciate that as well. Basically, I agree with what Rich said. I think that, first of all, version 1 needs to, if we're going to approve, we need to go with version 1. So version 2 is too restrictive. I would like to see the signs, the dimming question seems to be the biggest thing that we have at this point. I don't have a problem with them being lit, but not to a point where it affects safety, where it affects traffic, or if, you know, I mean, I personally have a couple of signs that you go to an intersection, the sign's right there, you try and look down the street, you can't see, it's just too bright. Now, one question I have is, do we have a limit on how bright they can be?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
And
we
if
do.
that,
0.3 foot cantilever ambient.
so, I mean, does that need to be taken a look at? I mean, is that something that might help calm down some of the comments from the community as far as their dissatisfaction with the lights? I want to bring up another point that was brought up on the other side of the coin, that light is effective in promoting safety. Dark areas, dark things happens in dark areas. So I'm going to go back with Rich's recommendation. I think might be a good idea to approve version 2.
Version 1 keeps
Version
going.
1, I'm sorry, not 2, not 2. That's pretty much what I had to say.
My other thought is, I don't think at this point I'm comfortable denying, for the reason this is significantly better than our current code. It is less restrictive in many areas, and just because it goes into code does not mean that amendments cannot be made. It does not mean that we cannot go back and improve it. It's not end all be all, but it does improve where we're at right now. And there's been a lot of work and a lot of research. This wasn't just put in carte blanche, we're gonna change it because we want to. It was thought out. There were surveys, there were working meetings, there was research, there was professional expertise from the business community and the city. So for me, it really comes down to, do we approve version 1 or version 2? I would lean also probably on version 1, which does allow for future billboards, because again, I really respect business growth in our area, and we are falling behind. And if billboards are what's gonna save our town, by all means, bring on the billboards responsibly. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I will.
Great.
I move to recommend approval of the repeal of Title 1520 Sign Code and the proposed amendments. Version, I'm reading, I don't know if I'm saying this right, it's how it's written. Version 1 to Title 17 zoning regulations, finding the amendments are following the comprehensive plan and the criteria listed in Section 1702-170 of Pocatello City Code. To include a sunset period, oh, that's correct. Yeah, sorry, I thought that was, we were talking about illumination again. To include a sunset period for implementation of the curfew. We recommend this language be a part of the motion and that the sunset date be no later than 1 year from date of sign ordinance adoption. I would like to insert the following conditions: that the curfew for illumination only apply to residential zones.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, that the,
Oh, hang on, Bruce.
Just want to clarify, does that include the RCP zone?
no,
Okay.
Say what you said again.
that the curfew for illumination only applies to residential zones. And that, I don't know how you want it, subsection D be shortened. Subsection D of section E, sorry.
Okay, so 17 point what, point what gets me to E?
All I have here is section E. I don't know if there's an actual, oh, how about 1707-050? Section E, subsection D,
D? Yeah,
Yep.
like dog.
be shortened to read
Okay.
during curfew hours, EMCs shall be shut off or dimmed.
What is it currently?
Currently, it's dimmed to 0.01 foot. Basically, they have to dim it to being dark.
But we won't. To what? That's kind of open-ended. Yeah. Is that how you want it? You
I
want it
think that's,
open-ended?
yeah,
One lumen
we don't
smaller,
know
that's
that.
dim? Oh,
Let him make it.
oh, okay.
Was there one other? I think that was it, wasn't there?
That was it.
I want to make sure before we send this through that we didn't. And authorize the chair to sign the findings of fact. And recommendations, yes, thank you.
I will second.
Motion by Phillips.
I get, now, this is an approval with the exceptions,
Yes.
okay? Just, so you don't, sometimes you vote yes to say no,
Yeah, I got
And
you.
I don't want to
That's true.
get confused on that.
Motion by Phillips, seconds by Fry. Aislinn, will you call a vote? Phillips,
Yes.
Fry,
Yes.
R2?
Yes.
No. Motion carries 3-1. That concludes this eventful evening. Thank you for coming to the Planning and Zoning meeting. Have a good evening.